Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody. Folks are still making their way to class a little bit, but glad you're here with us. I think Les has wandered off to get a cup of coffee, so he'll be back presently. Let's see. Hope everyone's had a good start to today. Obviously, being here together and worship is always a blessing, and certainly a blessing that we can be here as we continue our study here in Genesis. I have no idea how far we're actually going to get in Genesis. We're still working on getting out of Genesis chapter 3, but hopefully what we've been looking at, what we've been studying has been encouraging, as well as maybe thought-provoking, some things maybe we hadn't thought about before, and I think we're definitely going to be doing that again this morning as we go along. As we see here, he says he brought them to the man to see what he would name them. Whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, all the wild animals. I don't know about you. I always thought about, how did you decide what to name something? I mean, I don't know, but just like
you drop a pan and whatever sound it makes, that's the name of it.
That's the name of it. Okay, yeah. Or whatever shows up in your alphabet soup.
Whatever shows up in your alphabet soup. Yeah. And your question, or the question you raised last week, and of course giving names is if one holds to the view that Genesis 2 is simply a synopsis of Genesis 1 and believes that the world and all that was in it was created in six 24-hour days, how in the world do you name that many animals, get created, get put in a garden, told what you're supposed to do, name the animals, and then have a woman created all in 24 hours?
Yeah, it's and of course sometimes people, I've had the argument, well, God can do whatever he wants. I said, well, that's true, but if he's doing whatever he wants, then that necessarily may mean it's not a 24-hour day, and I think once we start to, I think part of the problem that we get into, and this kind of goes back to what you mentioned this morning in the lesson, is our preconceived ideas, and that we just think, well, this has to be right because this is what we've always been taught, and it's not until once we start getting questioned about it, and part of the problem with getting questioned about things, people can either be open to questions or they can become defensive about them. And I think what unfortunately tends to happen too often is people become defensive rather than thinking, partly with thinking, well, I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. And sometimes it goes deeper than that. I don't want to admit that my parents were wrong, or I don't want to admit, my preacher was, and it's almost like that becomes more important than the truth itself.
Again, remember a rule that I go by. If something in the text doesn't make sense, either my interpretation of the text is wrong, or something else is going on, for instance, in comparison to science. If something in the text appears to contradict science, such as here, how could you name how could you be created, name all the animals, then have the woman created, all in a 24-hour period? And my question would be, that's not what's going on, or my response would be, you're asking the wrong question. That's not what's going on in the text. Something else is going on in the text. Let me give you a very simple story. We'll get to it maybe later on. I told Lee this morning, he's slowing this study down tremendously. I would have already been in chapter 4 instead of in chapter 3. Not joking on that. It's taking us longer, but I'm enjoying this. But let me give you an example. Noah comes off the ark, plants a vineyard, makes wine, and gets drunk. Goes into his tent. He's naked. Ham comes along, sees him, goes and tells his brothers, you got to come see Dad. He's naked in his tent, and he doesn't seem right. And they, instead of going in and seeing what's going on, take a cover, go in, and they cover their father. Noah wakes up, discovers what Ham has done, and then doesn't curse Ham, curses Ham's son Canaan, which is weird because as far as we know, only 8 came off the ark. Where did this son come from? Now, I love my brethren. I love my brethren. Please don't ever misunderstand me. But my brethren can ask the strangest questions in the world. A professor of Old Testament at one of our Christian schools wrote a book on Genesis and came to this story. And do you know what the number one point of the story he drew from it? You want to guess?
What the actual curse was? Or,
No.
No?
What was his main point? When he got through analyzing the story of Noah and cursing of Canaan, what was the number one point he made? Anybody want to guess what it was? Don't drink wine.
Yeah, that's true.
In other words, this was caused because he drank wine, he got drunk, and so this whole episode is about the dangers of drunkenness. Brethren, that's nuts. Noah's not condemned for his drunkenness. Noah curses Canaan. And the reason he curses Canaan is a reason. Canaan is the father of the Canaanite tribes that Israel dispossesses when it comes into the land. This is a reason for God giving the land to the Israelites. Again, I tell people this all the time. I want you to think for a second. I come in one Sunday morning and I said, I got good news. God has told me that He has given the community of Brentwood to the members of the Hendersonville Church of Christ. All the houses, all the businesses, all the land of Brentwood now belongs to us. Go down there and pick you out a house. Only problem is you're going, all right. Is there anybody in the houses? Oh, yeah. Do they have guns? Oh, yeah. Do they have security system? Oh, yeah. Is the Brentwood police still there? Oh, yeah. And we're supposed to down there and take it? Yeah. Well, how are we going to do that? You got to kill everybody in Brentwood. And now you're going, why would I want to kill everybody in Brentwood? And the answer is, years and years and years ago, there was a curse placed on the people of Brentwood, which said that they would be replaced by the people of the Hendersonville Church of Christ. You see the point of the story? Now you may go, that is weird. Yes, it is. But if you think that that story is about drunkenness, you've missed the whole point of the story. You're not asking the right questions. So
I think the important part from all of this is, thank goodness we're members of Hendersonville.
Oh, and not Brentwood people?
Not Brentwood, yeah.
Yeah, not Brentwood people. Y'all see how that we come to a story in the text, and if you don't ask the right questions, you come away with the wrong answers. It happens all the time.
And I was the same way with being brought up, what the curse, that's our African American,
Yeah,
and
the descendants of Ham.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and when you're growing up with that initially, you're hearing that and you think, as a kid, you're like, well, okay, maybe that, you didn't really think.
The preacher said it.
The preacher said it, so it must be right. And it's not till you get older and you start studying and realizing, okay, this isn't making any sense. And then you have a choice. You either can get to the truth or you can keep believing a lie.
Continue to believe a lie. And by the way, I did not mention this morning because I ran out of time. One of the great leaders of the church in Nashville, Tennessee, believed in the curse of Ham. And that great leader was a guy named David Lipscomb. Now, David Lipscomb, on the other hand, was a huge proponent on the integration of African Americans and whites in the church. If you had asked David Lipscomb, do you believe that there should be separate black churches and separate white churches, David Lipscomb would have said, God forbid, never. But he also still believed in the curse of Ham. Again, it's easy to be taught this stuff and to believe it instead of going back and asking the right questions. All right. Why was there no suitable helper found for Adam among the animals?
Because there was nothing like Adam among the animals. And God, he even says that. There's not anybody suitable for
Yes.
Adam. He needs a helper. And so God sets about.
And obviously, as the animals are coming, I don't know if they came this way. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But maybe they came in pairs, male, female. Maybe he named the male and then the female. You get the boar hog, you get the sow. I don't know if he went that depth on his naming. But oftentimes we do that. But yeah, no suitable helper. And so now we get the fun.
Yeah.
God caused a sleep to fall upon, by the way, a deep sleep. God had propofol, for those of you who have ever had a colonoscopy. Okay? People ask me all the time, have you had a colonoscopy? Yes. Was it awful? Best sleep you'll ever get in your life. Man, when they put you to sleep, you're out, and when they wake you up, you're like, you've got to be kidding me. You just woke me up, Caused him to go into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs. Now, I want to say a word about that. The Hebrew word here is selah. And selah is found here in Genesis 2. It's found in Exodus in the building of the tabernacle. It is found in the building of the temple. Those are the primary places found. Everywhere else, selah, the Greek is plura, that's the Greek word. They're translated, except here in Genesis, differently. And I want you to see the differences. Genesis translates it, God took a rib. And I've heard that all my life. God took a rib. Okay? The joke about, the guy who, or the lady who went to the doctor and said, I want you to examine my husband because I think he's a rib short. It has to do with, okay, is there another woman in his life, kind of stuff. Watch the NET translation. This is one Stan Wilson's big on. Rodney knows this. Stan's huge NET fan. Watch the NET. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was asleep, he took part of the man's side. Didn't take a rib, took his side. And then, of course, closed up the flesh, and then, of course, creates the woman. I want you to think about this for a moment, because I like that translation better. Took his side, took a side of him. By the way, when you introduce Joan to other people, you call Joan your better what?
Better half.
Better half. Isn't that interesting? We refer to our spouses, this is my better half. Now, fully convinced, every other place is translated side with a couple of other odd translations, but usually it's about, okay, at the tabernacle on the side, the north side, on the south side, on the east side. In the temple, you had these storehouses on the side. And so usually this word selah is translated side, with the exception here in Genesis 2, where it's translated rib. I think probably better picture is that side. It's not just a bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, but he split us in half so that when we come together, we become one flesh all over again. I think that becomes an image that's so important. And so the God made the woman from the rib or the side. NIV says rib, NET says side, that had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. And you remember your Hebrew?
That 1 week intensive? No.
Yes, that one intensive, yeah. Yeah, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She'll be called woman, for she's taken out of man. Look at the Hebrew here. And when I say Hebrew, Rodney, this is out of the Orthodox Jewish Bible. So that's where I got it. I didn't put the Hebrew up there. I couldn't read it. But in the Adam, remember, this name is not a proper name. Adam is not his name. He is the Adam because he was taken from the Adamah. He is dirt because he was taken from the ground. I used to have an old brother in the church whose first name was Adam, and he would always sign his notes to me, dirt. Okay? That's the meaning of it. But notice down here, and the Adam said, this is now Itzim of my Itzim, and Basar of my Basar, she shall be called Isha, because she was taken out of Ish. Woman, because she was taken out of man. Our English actually does it pretty good justice.
Yeah.
because the words are just an extension of that. And so, Rodney, any thoughts on this? I haven't messed up yet.
Just keep talking. You'll get,
Listen, y'all have to understand something. When you're teaching in front of Rodney Cloud, it is...
intimidating.
Yes, intimidating. That's the word I was trying to get. Because here's a brother that when you mispronounce one of those Hebrew words, he's going, if only he had taken Hebrew under me instead of Jack Lewis. I mean, I know what he's thinking. He would have got that one right. And so, but I do appreciate Rodney so much because he and I talk a good bit on the phone, and he's real good about getting back if you've got a question, if you need something thought through or studied. Just appreciate his scholarship so much. But you can see through the language of Adam the interconnectedness of the man and the woman. We just added W-O on man and we get woman. They added, notice, an A to get Isha from Ish. And so you have the man and you have the woman. And then you have one of the most powerful texts about marriage. So reflect on this one.
Yeah, this is why man leaves his father and mother, united to his wife, they get joined together again.
Yeah, come back together
they become
again.
one flesh again. And of course, this is quoted in many times in marriage ceremonies. Of course, Jesus refers to it there in Matthew 19. When they're, the Pharisees were, talking about divorce.
About the divorce, yep.
But this whole aspect of, again, joining together, becoming one again, and for those of us who've had the privilege of, conducting marriage ceremonies, it really is. I mean, it gives you pause as you're preparing to do that, and of course you've been doing premarital counseling and stuff, but the actual privilege that it is to bring two people together hopefully after they've spent time and they've looked at the things that are similar, they look at the things that are different, they look at what each one brings to the table or to the marriage, so to speak, but joining them back together. That's marriage is not, it's not intended to only be temporary. It's intended to be forever. Now, we know, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't happen. We know that circumstances take place. But that was God's plan from the beginning. And again, it's when sin enters the world is when things go wrong.
And one of the things that we preachers oftentimes will say in a wedding is that you leave and you cleave. You leave your mom and dad. Notice, that is why a man leaves his father and mother. Leaves them. Mom and dad are not number one in his life anymore. I tell people all the time, you go through all of these various transitions in life of where, these intensities of these relationships are changed based on the time in life you have. When we're kids, mom and dad's, they're it. But then when we marry, you better not put mom and dad before spouse.
No. I know you. I think you've watched Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
And Howard and Bernadette. When he has a really hard time letting go of mom.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and of course, when you are marrying into another person's family. I mean, you're doing that, but the number one person in your family now has to be your spouse.
Yeah.
Has to be. And if it's not, that's opening up a world of hurt,
I tell people that you have a hierarchy of relationships. God comes first. After God, your spouse should be second. Okay? Then your children and your parents, depending on the age. Now you say, what do you mean by that? When my kids are young, my kids come before my parents. But as my parents get old and demand my time. My parents then come before my kids. In other words, my mom passed away about 4 years ago this fall. As my mom was getting older, my kids were already out of the house. My mother demanded more of my time than my kids did at that point. And my caring for my mother, June took care of her mother in her later years. Her relationship with her mother took precedent over the relationship with her kids at that time because it required it. God's designed this whole system. It is a brilliant system. And I hear people all the time say, I don't ever want to be a burden on my kids. Quit saying that. The Bible teaches right the opposite. I tell people all the time, I want to be a big burden on them. And they go, why? And I say, because they were a big burden on me. They got me up in the middle of the night.
And it's scriptural.
It's scriptural. I mean, you turn over to Paul, and Paul says, listen, if a person has children or grandchildren, let them repay their parents. June sent, let me rephrase this. We sent our kids to private school and then to college for 3 of their 4 years of college. They owe us. Okay? I added up one time between Goodpasture, Lipscomb, and Tennessee Tech, we spent $250,000. They owe us.
Have they started paying it back yet?
They still want me to buy them supper when we go out. Now, let me say that occasionally now they're starting to buy supper, and I'm letting them. Okay, yeah. But seriously, very important principle. And like you said, Jesus did. I mean, is it lawful? And Jesus says, have you not heard what was written? The Creator made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother, be united to his wife, they'll become one. And then look at the last one. This is one that Jesus added. This is not in Genesis, added by Jesus. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. We just throw that one aside. And we just don't, we don't preach it. I don't preach it enough because it's such a strong teaching.
Yeah.
Strong teaching.
Well, and I think too, within our society today, and I don't know how many times I've heard or have heard the argument put forward when you start talking about alternative lifestyles, and Jesus never said anything, about homosexuality or anything like that. I said, sure he did. I said, he's talking about what marriage, and talking about marriage. It's like he says, marriage, male and female. That's who marriage is for. It's not meant for all sorts of different relationships. And I say that just to, and I always try to say that in a caring way, because when you're having conversations with folks, but I also can't let it just go by and say, well, Jesus doesn't have anything to say about, alternative lifestyle, or, Jesus, God loves everyone, and so we should all be able to do whatever we want. I mean, if we stop and think about that logic for a minute, it's not logical at all.
Yeah.
But this whole aspect, again, coming together, joining together, let no one separate. And it's almost like as he takes things further than that. If you're compelled to walk carry a cloak or stuff 1 mile, carry it 2 miles. Someone wants your cloak, well, give them your cloak, but give them the rest.
Tunic as well.
Your tunic as well. He takes it further, and he doesn't take it further because there was anything wrong with the first at all, but he takes it further to show what it is our attitude and what our mindset and what our hearts are supposed to be about.
Yeah, and let me add to Lee what you said there. That language up there, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female. God created this binary, male and female. we now see what has happened as we've gotten away from God is that binary's gone out the window. I don't know if y'all know now, but if you get a passport now, you can put on your passport male, female, or other. Yes, sin and the fall has corrupted the perfect that God made. So if somebody were to say to me, why do people struggle with the binary? It's because sin has affected that just like it's affected everything else. You know, why do I struggle with heart disease? It's because of the fall. Why do people suffer with cancer? It's because of the fall. Why do we deal with diabetes? It's because of the fall. I don't know why we think somehow our sexuality is exempt from the fall. And so the fall affects it as well. And when the fall affects it, we shouldn't be surprised that people struggle with it. But it doesn't change the facts of the truth, which is God created us male and female. And so I agree with you, Lee. We've got to be respectful, but we've got to also stand for the truth. Yeah. And let me say one other word. I'm getting off on hobby, and I apologize for it. Huge debate going on right now over sexual transitioning. In other words, I'm 12 years old. I was born male, but I feel like I should be female. And so I'm going to transition over. I'm going to have surgery. I'm going to start taking hormones. I'm going to move from being a male to being a female. And what scientists are refusing to say, which they've got to desperately come back and say, is that you cannot change your chromosomes. Cannot be done. You can't take an X chromosome and make it into a Y. And so if you go and you start changing the body parts because you think the body parts will somehow line up with the mental aspect of it, all research to date shows that's not what happens at all. And I don't know if you've noticed what's happened in our culture. For the longest, the attempt was made to change the thinking so that it lines up with the body's DNA. Now it's going the other way. Let's change the body so that it links up with the DNA. Now we've outlawed the thinking. You're not allowed, this conversion therapy's been thrown out the window. You do that in Canada, you go to prison. But you do body therapy, you convert the body, and it's okay. None of that makes sense. No. And we've got to back up, and we've got to be more mature in our thinking on this and figure out how to help people who are struggling. And by the way, it's not just those issues that are affected by sin and the fall in the area of sexuality. It's all kinds of problems out there among heterosexuals as well that we have got to address if we're going to bring us back into the image of God. So, hobby, I apologize for getting off of it. I don't do a lot of preaching on it. I try to come to it when it comes in the text.
Yeah.
But
just one other thing, just real quick, and that is just a recognition that within our society, I mean, it breaks our hearts, when we are seeing this and seeing where is it going, how much worse is it going to get. We also need to realize and recognize this is not new.
No.
Now, science, unfortunately, in this case, is bringing about circumstances that are making it worse in some instances. But go back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Go back prior to that. Before the flood. Go back to first century. What and the things that were going on there, and things that were being, lives, the way life was being lived. This is not new. It's just that it's being packaged, if you like, in a different way. And so I think we have to recognize that this has been going on since the fall.
Yeah.
And sometimes it may sometimes seem to go in cycles, but it's always been here because sin has been here, since the fall.
All right. Adam and Eve were both naked and they felt no shame. And that word shame there becomes so important. Let me go back. I didn't mean that shame is so important. Again, you look at the text and you go, okay, what's going on here? Pick up on what he's trying to teach, not that which he's not trying to teach. In other words, people try to. I love artists who try to picture Adam and Eve, and they're always standing behind bushes, And of course, we put them behind bushes. Why? Because it's a shame to show them naked, even though they were naked and they weren't ashamed. And by the way, the best thing I know to describe this, if you want to see it in its most pure element, is when you've got a 2-year-old grandchild or child, and they get out of the bathtub and they run through the house naked. They could care less. They don't care. They have no shame at all. And you see the purity before, unfortunately, the fall kicks in. All right, here we go. Start us out with chapter 3. It's time for some fun.
The serpent more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. And you kind of wonder, why was that? I mean, that's just something that's always, well, why? We don't know, but that's just the way it was. He said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Right there, if I'm the way I'm looking at it, I was like, well, you must not eat from any tree. Can you not eat from anything? He's already setting up his next statement with his next lie. So he's laying the groundwork for it here.
A story, by the way, that we're all familiar with. In fact, I preached on part of it this morning, okay? We've been dealing with the devil. We've been dealing with the ancient serpent. We'll see that here in a moment. Again, though, your question, why is he more crafty? And then even a better question, why can't he talk? Right? Y'all, let's face it. Hey, honey, I found a snake in the utility room. Well, what did it say? We don't ask that question, right? Wow. But yeah, here's a snake that talks. Again, don't ask the questions the text doesn't want you to ask, simply because the text doesn't give the answer. Why is he more crafty? Why is he able to talk? Now you say, well, the text later on explains that. Okay, maybe. I get that. But oftentimes we ask questions that the text is not. But yeah, that ancient serpent, let me go back. Revelation 12:9 links the serpent. I know, Rodney, a lot of Old Testament scholars don't like the mingling of the Old Testament and the New Testament. They're like, okay, don't read back into the Old Testament, New Testament concepts. And of course, I know Jewish scholars especially don't do that. But the Bible definitely does that. New Testament does read back into it. And so here's John equating with the ancient serpent, and that's the only serpent we have, unless you want to go back to Leviathan, and then says, of course, it's the devil or Satan, and leads the whole world astray, going back to the story that just took place. Yeah. So, yeah. And like you said, he sets that first, but why is this a part of this first temptation? Because what is he doing to Eve?
He's trying to make, I think he's trying to get her to think, what's God keeping from me? And because that's what he's going to play off on, very shortly here.
Right.
What's he keeping from you? He's also trying to suggest that God said something that he didn't say, and so he's waiting on Eve to give a response, which is then going to allow him to go where he goes next.
Yeah. By the way, planting questions in people's minds is the easiest way to get them to mess up. Lee, I did Bible camp for years. And one of the things you'd always have in Bible camp is some kind of story that you're going to plant in the minds of the new kids coming to camp for the first time. And I remember one time at Taylor Christian Camp, which is up near Scottsville, Kentucky. And I did not do this. I want to be very honest, very open about it. I did not do this. But some of the older teenagers began to tell the little 3rd and 4th graders that in the woods around Taylor Christian lived an ape man. They called Monkey Man. Okay? And so they would be sitting there and they'd say, "Did you see something down there?" And the kids would all look. And it was okay them playing that trick until one of the teenagers actually brought a gorilla outfit to camp one year. Went down into the woods, and after planting all of these thoughts in the minds of the kids, this teenager came out of the woods in a gorilla outfit. Let's just say there was a lot of problems that had to be fixed. Planting thoughts gets you in trouble.
How many of the kids were wanting to go home at that point?
Yeah, that was some of the nicer stuff that happened. Okay. You know, you set it up. He sets it up beautifully, horribly here. So,
craftily.
How did she respond, and why did what she respond get her further into trouble?
Yeah. So the woman says to the serpent, "We can eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that's in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." And you must not touch it. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
You know? And so she's responding, but she's not. Where she got that next part, I don't know. After she was created, did Adam say, "Hey, by the way, don't eat it, but I'm going to throw something else in there. Don't touch it either."
Yeah.
If you don't touch it, you can't eat it.
But either way, somebody added to the commandment.
Yeah, exactly, which invariably almost always gets you into trouble. When you start adding, God says don't add, don't take away. When we do those things, it leads us into a mess.
So you see what happens. I mean, Satan's planning the deception. Eve responds to it, and the next thing you know, she's enhanced the commandment. Don't eat, don't even touch it. And so now you see the problem as it's developing. And so you must not touch it. Woo! Did Adam say it? Did she say it? Either way, it's not what God had said. And then comes the blatant lie.
Yeah. You will not certainly die. Serpent, just flat out. After that, he's saying, you're not going to die. God just doesn't want you to be like him. He's afraid, if you're going to be like him, then you won't need God anymore. You'll be able to do whatever you want to do. You can be like God. And that starts sounding really good. You go back to, lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, the pride of life. Pride seems to be playing a big part here. I could be like God. I could do this. That would be tempting. That is tempting to a lot of people.
But you shall not surely, or you will not certainly die. You think about how many times Satan has lied like that in your life. I still remember a good friend of mine when I was in college, Lee, and he was working on a term paper one night, and I was in the room with him. And as he was working on his term paper, I noticed that what he was doing, Rodney, was simply typing up another term paper of somebody else and putting his name on it. To which I said, that's going to catch up to you. He said, oh, no. He said, professors never look at other teachers' term papers. And so just get another term paper and you'll be in good shape. Okay? Remember the story. I'm in chapel. My friend comes up to me. He says, Les, I'm in trouble. I said, why are you in trouble? He said, well, Brother Claiborne, Winfred Claiborne was one of the teachers there. He was teaching a class on marriage and the family. He said, Brother Claiborne, in his first class, said that two students had turned in the same term paper. In other words, one had borrowed it, then the other had borrowed it and turned it into the same teacher. The teacher confronted the girl in the first class. Did you write this paper? Oh, yes, Dr. Claiborne, I wrote that paper. Well, then why did so-and-so turn it into my second class? And then she just broke down crying and admitted she had lied. You'll certainly not get caught. To which my friend said to me, how do I get out of this mess? And I said, you march into Brother Claiborne's office and admit you're a bald-faced liar and beg for forgiveness. And Dr. Claiborne forgave him, but took a letter grade off of. I would have taken 2 letter grades, Rodney. I would have docked them 2 letter grades. You know, you'll not certainly die. You'll not certainly get caught. Nobody will find out. Always a lie.
Always.
John 8:44, when he lies, he speaks his native language. This is a verse we've been looking at last 2 or 3 weeks on Sunday morning. That's the point. He was a liar from the beginning. And then here's what he then further lied. So again, one more time, take us through this one.
Yeah. God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open.
Now let me pause there for a moment.
Yeah.
Were their eyes open?
Not right away. I mean, well, it's interesting. I almost feel like we need to get to the next part.
Okay, we'll keep going. Keep explaining.
Yeah.
We'll keep going.
Yeah. You'll be like God. You know, again, knowing good from evil. And when you think about knowing good from evil, remember, they don't know shame. They don't, you know, they don't
know sin.
They don't
They
know
haven't
sin.
sinned.
They don't know sin. I don't even know if they know what. I don't even know if they'd have a concept of evil. Honestly, I mean, I don't know where that would fall into their, you know, mindset at that point, as far as exactly what they thought that would be. But again, he's just setting them up, you know. And again, you talk about, you know, the father of lies. I mean, it is his native language. I mean, that's what he does over and over and over.
So, you know, in one sense, their eyes were opened. In one sense, they did know the difference between good and evil. But it's not the sense that he's leading Eve to think.
Right.
And so, yeah, truth, you know, Satan loves to mingle truth with lies. He always does it. I mean, y'all forgive me for this, okay? I'm going to go ahead and ask forgiveness first. For years, I played chess with a friend at Northside. Every Wednesday night, we played chess. We would play 3 games, usually. Now, sometimes I would only win 1 out of the 3. And my friend would always ask me this question: when you go home tonight, what are you going to tell June? And I would say, I'm going to tell June I won. And he says, but you only won 1. I said, June didn't ask me how many I won. She only asked me how it went. And I'm going to tell her, well, that's not telling the whole truth. He'd get so upset. He was like, you got to tell her the truth. Y'all see the point.
Well,
You can tell a little bit of the truth and still lie.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't there a phrase one of our politicians used a number of years ago, being economical with the truth?
Economical with the truth. That's what I was being.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
yeah. Woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. You know, again, temptation has to look good for it to be temptation. So clearly this fruit looked good.
if the apple had just had a bunch of wormholes in it.
Yeah. Or if it had been like a kumquat, you know.
Is that a fruit?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But and of course, you know, Adam's, you know, we talk about Adam's apple. I mean, it must have been an apple. Had to have been an apple. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, Adam's banana doesn't sound right. So it had to have been Adam's apple, right?
All right. Notice also, good for food, pleasing to the eye, desirable for gaining wisdom. As Lee quoted a while ago, 1 John 2:16. All temptation falls in these 3. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. All 3 of these fell in. In other words, the lust of eyes, it looked good. Lust of the flesh, desirable for food. Pride of life,
Be like God.
be like God. Temptations of Jesus, same way. Bread, lust of the eyes, throwing yourself off the temple, pride of life. All the kings of the earth, lust of the flesh, power. And so you get all of these different ways. And of course, Eve, unfortunately, and Adam are going to fail in all 3. All right, our time is up. Thank you for letting us just kind of talk through this. Lee and I don't do a lot of talking ahead of time. I throw him slides. He shoots slides back to me. We talk a little bit. But basically, it's just our opportunity to kind of pick each other's brains and let you listen in on it. And thank you for letting us do that. Let me once again say, if you've not been coming to The Chosen, we're not going to show an episode of The Chosen tonight. Let me tell you what we are going to show. We're going to show what happens when 10 Generation Zs, okay, that's the latest generation coming up. What happens when 10 Generation Zs sit down and watch The Chosen without knowing what they're watching? In other words, they're hired to do a binge viewing of a TV series that they have no clue what it's about. What happens to them? You want to see what happens when we use things like The Chosen, if we can just get people to see it. Come back and watch tonight. You'll go, wow, didn't know it could be that powerful. It can be. We're just going to watch that interview, watch that storyline, and then do a little reflections on it. Lee, how about leading us in a prayer?
God, we again thank you for this day. We're thankful for our time together. We pray that you will always use us to be a light, to be salt to those around us, to allow you to be seen in us. And we recognize that we make mistakes, we sin. We ask for your forgiveness on that. We pray that those that we're trying to influence will also forgive us of that and will instead see what it is that we're trying to share. And that is the good news that truly can save each and every one of us. We pray for those who are dealing with various struggles right now. And we ask your blessings on them, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Be a strength to them. Help us to do what we can to ease their burdens as well. Again, thank you so much for